Today's first question says, I'm writing today because my wife is going through a period of suffering, and I feel quite helpless to do anything about it. First, she feels like she's too normal. I haven't heard that complaint in a while. She feels as though she doesn't excel at anything, like too average in particular. And no matter what she applies herself to, never seems to work out. So she feels like she doesn't really have much to offer the world. She sees me starting projects and finishing them successfully, but because she can't do that, she feels like she's no good. But no matter how I seem to approach this, it doesn't seem to help. So I suggest that you actually have her watch this recording so that she can get the answer firsthand, and so I'll address her. So first, I'm not trying to make you feel good about yourself. That's actually a pretty futile effort, and it's really likely that your husband's been doing that. People say, oh, I'm no good, and then, or I'm just stupid. And then what we do is we argue with them. We say, oh, no, you're not, because we've been trained to do that. It's almost a social game we play. Somebody says, I'm worthless, and then we're all been trained to say, no, you're not worthless. You're a good person. And that's such a socially accepted thing, we think it's good. Well, actually, we're not listening to the other person. We've skipped the whole listening step. And if we're going to make a difference in people's lives by loving them, how can we do that if we're not listening? So people speak, we say, no, you're not. Well, they're not making this up. They're getting it from someplace. So, here you are, you're feeling like you're just too normal. And I'm not going to respond to you by being all positive. Kumbaya, we'll sing around a campfire. The only thing that really works is telling the truth. So, first thing that I notice is that you're comparing yourself to other people. That's just a truth. And comparing ourselves to other people is almost always a disaster. Comparing is just awful. Should be forbidden. Because nobody can be like you. You can't be like anybody else. You can only be you. You can't be the best Fred or Susie or William, but you can do something about being the best that you've got. Now, that brings us to the real core of your complaint, which is that you might be just average. Well, okay, you might be. And from what your husband says, that you talk about how you have trouble finishing projects. Let's just assume, rather than argue with you, about whether you're average, let's assume you are. You might be. They've done numerous social psychology experiments, and on the whole, the general feeling that people have about who they are is at least roughly correct, although it turns out that we're way more correct about appraising other people than we are ourselves. So let's assume that you're just average, that you're not one tiny whit above the 50th percentile in every imaginable category. But somewhere you've gotten the idea that to be worthwhile, you have to be above average. Where did that come from? Everywhere. Our parents praised us when we were above average. Our teachers praised us. I mean, what teacher ever had a student, stand up in the middle of the class and go, I would just like to congratulate, Billy on being at the 50th percentile? Never happened. And so what we learned is that to be superior, to be special, is what makes us worthwhile. Because that's what everybody said. Well, everybody's wrong. Let's say you're, like I said, let's assume that you're just average. Is it possible that being average, you could be good enough? You could be happy. Yes, in fact, just being average, you can be spectacularly happy. You can be plenty good enough, and you can still do a great deal to contribute to your happiness and to the happiness of the people around you. but not as long as you're not satisfied with who you are. So, miss 50th percentile. In fact, let's really stretch it. Let's say you're at the 49th percentile, because then you'd be below average. Still good enough. Still can be perfectly happy. So how is it that you could benefit other people while being at the 49th percentile in everything? Because, it's another common ploy that people use when people say they're just average, to say, oh, no, you're at least above average in something. We all have our special talent. See, we're just playing the same game again still. That we can only be okay if somehow we are superior in some way. Well, now that's just a real drag, isn't it, for people who are not? What do you do for the people who are in the 20th percentile? Go, well, that was a mistake. Kill them and start over. It's a terrible lie we've bought. So what do? You experiment. You experiment and you practice and you play with who you are. But none of this is going to do any good unless you can accept the possibility that at the 49th percentile you can still be deliriously happy, because you really can. How do I know? Because I know lots of people like that. So you can experiment with all kinds of areas of your life, but one thing that you can become really great at, even at the 49th percentile, be more than good enough, is practicing getting loved, practicing loving other people. I just don't care anymore how I compare to other people. Now, sure, I have stupid moments, but overall I don't. I just do the best I can do. Sometimes it's really not very good, but it's all I've got. And I know that even in my stumbling moments, I've benefited other people, and I'll continue to be able to help other people. Now, could I be better? Sure. Compared to now, if you were to consider the ability that I have to love people now, which is still kind of okay, but if you were to consider that 100, which I'm not saying it is, I'm just making an arbitrary number, then 15 years ago, when I first started practicing with real love, where would I have been? I don't know, maybe a 2. So, should I have given up then? Wailed and moaned? Laid on the couch and cried about what a miserable wreck I'd made of my life? Well, I could have. But then I would never have learned what I know now. So, what I got's all I got. And you just keep taking the next step forward to discover, A, what you're capable of, B, what you enjoy, and then when you combine those two, you discover ways that you can really be an enormous blessing to other people while still at the 49th percentile. Really. I worked for a summer when I was a kid working with Down syndrome kids. Let me tell you, every one of those kids would have thought the 49th percentile was Einsteinian. These were all retarded kids. And yet, they all managed to find something, some kids, several things, that made them very happy. And in a number of subtle ways contribute to the happiness of other people. They didn't have to be especially competent or especially brilliant or talented or whatever, and you don't either. I'm going to come back, if we have time, to another question that you have here, but I'm just going to suggest that you play around with your averageness and discover what makes you happy. And don't assess its worth according to the criteria that are normally used in the world, like money, fame, power. It's about how you enjoy it and whether it has value to others. That's what's going to end up making you happy, not what other people say about it. So we'll come back to a second issue here in a little bit if we have time. And I would encourage your husband, by the way, to not play the game with you of convincing you that your worth or your happiness are dependent on your being special. This viewer says, every month in anticipation of my period, I start to focus on when it will come. I'm more aware of how I'm feeling and any possible PMS. I often do struggle more when I have PMS, and it often can last a week or so before my period. It's possible that I could look into this pattern and do something about it. So first, I can't tell you what it's like to have a period or PMS, but I have talked with a few hundred women who have this problem, so I might know a little about it. I might be at the 49th percentile in my knowledge. For the medical part, many women are made to feel, and I don't mean necessarily, well, yeah, no, it usually is because of other people's opinions, but women feel like they're somehow morally and mentally defective, so there's something they should have done to prevent this. It can be a big help to you, huge, if you understand that you just can't help it. It's not a mistake you make, it just happens, like getting a cold. I don't like getting a cold either, I'm just getting over one. But I don't sit around and feel defective, nor do I feel victimized by it. It's just inconvenient. Just knowing that can make a big difference if you would really allow that this is something that just periodically, excuse the pun, occurs. And, you know, sometimes you can, you know, if everything else you do doesn't work, you can actually get meds from your physician to help you. You continue. Right now, I think it's best to focus on real love and eliminating emptiness as a reason for this low. I'm wondering if in some way I create or perpetuate this. Each month I know this is likely to happen, so I choose to feel like a victim of my cycle. You're correct. You actually are a victim of any particular physical ailment that comes along. So your cycle does victimize you in that it causes you inconvenience. But it's your choice whether you feel like a victim. I have a cold. I am a victim of a cold. I didn't ask for it. It just came on me. So I'm a victim of it. But I don't feel like a victim. I feel tired, have a runny nose, feel cranky a little bit sometimes, but I don't feel victimized, even though I am a victim. It's a choice, the way we feel about the thing. Now I realize that I can't work as long, I can't write as long in a day, I can't take as many phone calls, I get tired sooner, so I rest more. I deal with what is. You continue, I'm quick to choose to blame how I'm feeling on my hormones. By doing this, I'm avoiding the responsibility of taking care of myself and keeping full and feeling loved. And you went on, you talked a little bit more about feeling victimized. So if you simply understand what's happening to you, that's different than feeling like a victim. So instead of blaming, then you're simply gathering information. You're explaining. Explaining is good. Blaming, not so good. Explaining is about information. Blaming is about attacking. Getting a sense of revenge, shuffling off responsibility, and that's something that you can choose not to do. So what can you do? You chart it on a calendar, for one thing. I'm amazed at how many women don't have this charted out. I'm stunned. I ask women this all the time. So do you mark on the calendar as far ahead as is reasonably predictable, and say, well, you know, this is about when this is going to happen to me? No. Which means that every month they're surprised by this. No kidding. Every month this comes along and they go, whoa, they're 2 or 3 days into PMS and feeling bad and cutting everybody's head off. And then it occurs to them, oh yeah, this might be hormonal. We can deal with a whole lot of things better if we know they're coming. So chart it. And yeah, it may not be perfect 28-day cycle. Many women don't. But at least, you know, you get a clue. You know, so starting several days before the anticipated arrival of this misery, you start thinking, you know, I'm going to make some calls to people. I'm going to get myself sort of all juiced up here with a little love. And then when it comes on, then I'm just going to tell people, not feeling really great today. Just, you know, it's the usual thing. And then you get more of what you need. Let's see. You go on and you say, I'm lying to myself and others when I believe that hormones are the only problem that's out of my hands. Finding love is always in my hands. I'm just being crazy and irresponsible. Making the calls is not a problem for me. I've made a lot this past week. Acting and feeling like a victim, lying, not telling the whole truth, that's the problem. Feeling only fleetingly loved by the call is the natural result of this behavior. So you're right. It's not just about making calls. And I hear sometimes on conference calls, people will say, well, just make more calls. Well, it's not necessarily true that just making more calls is the thing. Just like in practicing the piano, just putting in more time doesn't make you better. You actually have to practice smarter. And same with telling the truth. I mean, if we get on a call and we whine and complain and act like victims and then people don't stop us, well, pretty much each minute that somebody doesn't stop me while I'm acting like a victim, it's confirming for me that I am one. And so sometimes the calls that we make can actually make things worse. So you need to ask yourself rigorously, am I telling the truth? And you might collar a couple of seasoned wise people and say, if you hear me acting like a victim, would you be willing to say you're doing it now so that I can see it? And then your calls become more productive. Here's a woman who says, I've had a lot of questions for you lately. My husband and I have used a lot of anger with each other in our past to try to get our way. My anger is lessening as I become more filled up with real love. My husband, on the other hand, still resorts to anger, although he's using it somewhat less as well. It's like he's this big 6'2", 260-pound guy on the floor throwing a temper tantrum. His anger used to frighten me so that I would easily cave in to whatever he wanted, hence his keeping it up. That's a good insight on your part. People pretty much don't throw tantrums when they don't get something from them. But almost invariably they do. When somebody throws a tantrum, everybody in the room either scatters or they sympathize. Oh, I'm so sorry. What have I done to offend you? And no matter which of those two responses they get, the people who throw these little tantrums and act like victims feel like they're in control of the room. They feel like victims in the first place because they feel out of control and helpless. So if their tantrums or their anger get any response, they're going to keep doing it. So if somebody throws a fit and you even go, it's just a change in facial expression, then you're essentially training them to do it again. Parents can be so dense about this. They have a child who keeps throwing a fit, and I keep telling the parents, it's you. And they say, well, but I'm not reacting to it. And so sometimes I'll even just go, do you ever do this? Do you ever even change your facial expression as your child's having a fit? Well, yeah. Well, then that's why your kid continues to do it. It gives them a feeling of power. So that's a cycle that's going to have to be broken before he'll quit this. You continued. It's not working so well anymore. He's quite often the victim, so I will ask him loving questions to get to the gist of what's going on. Try to lovingly help him see that anger doesn't ever make us happy, and that is truly what we want in life, right? When I ask him questions, he says that they are rhetorical. I can see where this was going. And insult his level of intelligence. This always cracks me up because the thought crosses my mind that a 27-year-old man basically throwing a temper tantrum is pretty much insulting his own intelligence. Angry, victim-y people are impossible. If you do nothing, then they tell you that you don't care. If you try to do anything, it's always the wrong thing. So victims live in a world where nobody can ever make them happy. Now you might ask yourself, why would they be like that? Because if you ever made them happy with anything you did, they'd have to give up being victims. And they can't do that. It's the only way they know how to live. So notice that here you are, he's having a fit, he's mad, and you're trying to help him see while he's mad that anger doesn't ever make us happy. He's never going to see that, not while he's mad. While people are angry, they're insane. Don't reason with them. Don't do it. The only thing that will work in the short term is to just ask him what he needs. Now, we'll get to this in a second because you continue. My question is, how do I handle the comment from him about the rhetorical questions? I've explained to him in the past that I ask questions because it helps me to show him how I am looking at a certain matter. It helps me to explain. well, that's really cute and all, but, you know, in the moment that he's acting like a victim, he doesn't really care how you see things. All he cares about is feeling loved. Then you continue. Maybe because I see him as having a temper tantrum, like a baby at times, that comes through in my manner, and I'm not really and truly being unconditionally loving in those moments. Maybe deep down, I think that I'm better than he is, and it comes across. If you're feeling toward him in the moment like you're describing him here, like a baby, then it probably comes across. Now, it is possible to not be feeling irritated at the time and still describe his behavior later as being like a baby, but if you really got what he was doing, you'd describe him in a different way. You'd describe him as empty, confused, lost, and so on. You're conveying a sense of superiority to him, even in your explanation. As you're explaining to him the meaning of anger, he doesn't want that. Like you said, he's a baby throwing a tantrum. You can't explain things to somebody in that condition, but you can offer what is available to you in terms of love. You could, for example, ask him what he'd like. So here he is pouting, and his arms are across his big chest, and he's looking all tough, which you realize really isn't tough. It's really just kind of childish. And you just say, is there anything that you'd like from me right now? Now, if he's a typical victim, what he'll say is, no. Victims are very predictable. I wish, CD players were as predictable as victims. And so he'll say no. And so you say, well, then I'll come back in a few minutes and see if there's anything I can do. You're showing him that you're absolutely not following into the trap of his victimhood. He's inviting you onto the field of death. That's what his pouting is about. And when you say, well, what can I do? And he pouts some more. You say, I'll be back. And then you come back in 20 minutes or so and sit down next to him. And you just touch him on the leg and say, so how are you doing? He'll grumble. You do that 2 or 3 times, and he may not come out of it at all, even after 2 or 3 times. Fine. Then you're not responsible for him. But don't give him a dang lecture either. So then just leave him alone. Then when he's not having a tantrum, while he's being semi-sane, then you have a conversation about his anger. And you can say, over the last couple of days there have been a couple of times, in fact, let's just pick one. The time when you blank, that you seemed really irritated. And I want to talk about that a little bit. You're going to get to an example here in a minute, so we'll get more specific. You said he hates it when we're watching a movie together, and I have to pause it. He was an only child, so he didn't grow up with a lot of interruptions as a kid, whereas I grew up in a family of 5, so it's no big deal to me, whatever. That's a cute explanation. Psychologists would probably love that. But it's not about his having been an only child, because many only children would not mind having their movie interrupted. It's mostly about his emptiness. And you can be empty in a large family or a small one. He's empty, so he's selfish, and he's demanding of getting what he wants right now. And that's the problem. You continue. I really tried to honor his request not to pause movies, and so I just let phone calls that I get go to voicemail. But the other day we were watching a movie, and I got a call from a dear friend who's going through breast cancer. She needs my love and support, so I told Fred that I'd be taking the call and asking him to pause the movie. He knows my friend and her situation, but then during the next 10 minutes, the entire conversation, he sighed and moaned and groaned and made comments under his breath about how he hates pausing movies and how he wished I would drop everything to answer his calls. And when I got off the phone, he was still huffy and bent out of joint and reminded me how he hated pausing movies. I lovingly let him know, see, I'll bet you're about to explain something to him. You can't explain things to crazy people. I lovingly let him know that I'd already let 2 previous phone calls go to voicemail. No, he's not going to hear it when he's nuts. And I answered this one because it was planned before I knew he was going to be home. I said it was important to give my friend the things he doesn't care about any of that. So you spent a lot of energy convincing him that he was being foolish. But while he's nuts, he can't hear that. It's very hard at the time. What you can do is when he's sane you can plan ahead for these things. So you could say to him, you know, sweetie, you are just the most important person in my life. But it is impossible. Listen to me. Look at me. Tell him that. Say, you're the most important person in my life overall. But from moment to moment, things will come up that would have to be put before you, which doesn't mean that you're no longer the most important person in my life, but you may not be the most important thing in that moment. So, if your husband's the most important, but then your child falls down and breaks his nose, well, then in that moment, the child has to be attended to. Other things are always going to come up. I'm on the phone a lot in a day. And during those times, I can't be talking to Donna. Well, she doesn't then go, well, I guess I'm just not the most important thing anymore. No, there are other things. And if we have to put a given person most important in every moment, well, we couldn't do anything else. And so you explain first that one point. You say, do you understand what I'm telling you? You don't move on till he gets it. And then if he has any objections, you say, well, then let's do it the other way around. If I'm the most important person in your life, then you'd never go to work, you'd never do anything else, you'd stay and you'd attend to my needs all day. Does that sound reasonable? No, it isn't. So you are still the most important, but there are going to be things that come up. So occasionally things are going to happen, and we might be in the middle of a movie. And, 4 times out of 5, I'm not going to interrupt what we're doing. But sometimes I will. And then you say, at those times, so far, you're just telling him how things are. You're not asking for his input. Well, a little bit when you say, do you get that I can't be attending to you every moment? But that's a fact whether he gets it or not. And then second, occasionally things are going to come up. Now the third one he has input on. You say, so when those things happen, what would you like me to do? So we could pause the movie and I could go have my phone call and come back. Or I could simply go in the next room and have the phone call and you can continue with your movie. That way you don't have to pause your movie. What do you want? But all of the sighing and anger and irritation, those ruin the movie for both of us far more than the interruption of a 10-minute call. Don and I go through this. You can't imagine how many times any given thing, any activity, a movie, whatever, are interrupted by phone calls. And what happens is we just kind of make quick decisions. Usually it doesn't last a long time. I get on the phone, I finish my call, and we go back to what we're doing. Donna gets on the phone with somebody, I just pick up a book and do something else. You might offer him that option. You say, would you like to have a book that you're reading for when I'm on the phone? Or I could go in the other room and you can keep going with your, up to you. And Donna and I vary our routine all the time. I just pick up a book. I just continue doing something if she's on the phone. If it's going to be a really long time, either one of us might say, like today Donna said, I'd really like to finish this meal without being interrupted by another phone call. So I said, done. Then this meal will not be interrupted by another phone call. And I didn't return a call, even though it was to one of my kids, one of our kids, that I told him I'd return the call in 20 minutes. Well, turns out it was 60. Because Donna in that particular moment said, I don't want to be interrupted again this evening. So I said, cool. Now, what if I'd said, what if it was just really important to me to return that call? Well, I sure could have. Then I could have just said, I'd like to go return the call. Do you want to finish the meal here? Do you want to watch a movie? What is it you want to do? But we work it out. And that's what the conversation you need to have with him. We're going to work out a plan, and then we can figure out variations on the plan, as opposed to getting mad, huffy, fussing, criticizing, sighing, and saying you're sick of having your movie interrupted, which just makes everybody's evening just go straight into the toilet. Talk to him when he's sane. Here's a viewer who says, for most of my life, I have searched for unconditional love. And today, after seeing your website, for the first time, I feel more at peace than I have for a very long time. Well, good for you. My son is 20, lives at home with us, and is usually a pleasant person. He does have some unresolved anger issues. As a child, you'll get this the more that you read stuff, but people don't have anger issues. People get angry in response to the real issues, which are that they haven't been loved. As a child, he and his father were very close. They golfed together since my son was 7. Now, as soon as I hear that, as soon as I hear that a father has been engaging regularly in a one particular sport, not just playing with the kid, but like really focusing on one sport from the time a kid was little, like, under 8. It's not always the case, but boy, does that set off alarm bells, because fathers in those circumstances find it almost impossible not to have enormous expectations of their kids. They expect their kids to be successful for them, to vicariously be champions, essentially representing their fathers, and the expectations are just deadly. You continue, my son was a very good golfer, and that made my husband very proud. And see that phrase right there, in the world, you say that out in the world, my husband is very proud of my son. And everybody goes, oh, that's just so sweet. And when I hear it, I can tell you that 99% of the time, no kidding, that will turn out to be a disaster. Because then, if I'm proud of my son when he's a great golfer, what am I when he's not? What am I when he, scores 120 over 18 holes? What am I when he decides to quit golfing altogether? It's a real dangerous road that we go down when we tell our children that we are proud of them because of their successes. Whoa, what a formula for disappointment. You continue. When my son began competing in golf, my husband became much more critical and demanding. They usually fought on the golf course because maybe my son made a bad shot or wanted to take a golf cart instead of walking. And see, there's the other shoe that's dropped. This happens a lot. It's a reflection of an enormous degree of conditional love, and it affects the child really badly. You continue. At that time, I could see the increasing tension my son was feeling, and that he was so afraid to fail or make a mistake. He eventually gave up the game, even though his golf instructor felt that his swing was, professional in its quality. My husband then said that the game was never really in my son's heart to begin with. So it's completely understandable that he'd quit, isn't it? Losing approval feels worse than winning approval feels good. So kids will do, even though the kid may have enjoyed the praise he got for golfing well, kids will do anything to avoid disapproval. And so the kid just quit. And then what happened? What was the father's reaction? The father didn't say, oh, well, whatever would make you happy, son. That's what a loving father does. He wasn't delighted. He didn't accept it. No, he said, well, something's wrong with this kid. He didn't have that competitive edge. He didn't have his heart in it from the beginning. It was set up to be like this from the very beginning when he started golfing with this kid. My son does love his dad, and I know my husband loves my son. It may not be real love in its full scope, but I believe deep in everyone's soul is a type of love. It should be real love. You're sounding pretty confused. But without the education or receiving of it, how do we know it? I'm praying that I've found it in the books and on the website. This is hard stuff to hear. This is probably the hardest thing a parent will ever hear, is to hear the truth about the love they give their children. And it's one of the hardest things a child will ever come to face. But probably the biggest source of conflict in any child's life, and later as an adult, is this. It's that a child says, I know my parents love me, so why do I often feel so bad as I'm interacting with them? Why do they behave as the way they do? There's this insoluble conflict. They cannot make sense of it. And the answer is easy. They don't love you. You know, we parents, we mean to, we want to, we know we should, we wish we did, but all of that doesn't make it so. Nothing good can happen in a relationship or in an individual life unless it's built on the truth. And we don't start with the truth. We start off with, well, I love my children, I know my husband loves my son, and I know he loves him. No, it's actually not true. And once you see that that's not true, that your husband has not unconditionally loved your son. Yes, I know he tried to. He did his best. There's no criticism in this. I'm like not annoyed or condescending, or he just didn't know how. But until you tell the truth about it, this boy is going to be torn up by a difference between what he's hearing and what he's seeing or feeling. He knows something's wrong. And as long as you keep claiming, my husband loves my son, or even I love my son, it's just going to kill this kid. You continue. My husband owns his own business, and my son has been working for him since he was 17. My son started dating a girl that also works for my husband. So without another word, you already know where this is going to go, don't you? This father needs to feel success vicariously from his son, and that hasn't worked out, and so now he's going to control him. So let's see what you say. She's a single mom, the girl that my son's dating, and 3 years older than my son. My husband decided to make the rule that there would be no fraternizing in the company. He should have just told your son straight out it was about him. And he gave them both the choice that one of them would have to leave. It's a terrible message that he's sending his son, and he doesn't mean to. But see, I hear that excuse all the time. People say, well, I didn't mean to hurt his feelings. I believe you, but you didn't mean not to either. You didn't do what it took so that you would be loving. Then you say, well, I didn't mean to hurt. You know, that's just not good enough. He might as well have forbidden this boy, 20 years old, from seeing the woman that he wanted to be with. I mean, this is the story of Romeo and Juliet. Look how that turned out. You continue. She needed the job and felt unwanted by us, so she broke it off with my son. My son was hurt and wanted to get back with her, but she refused because of the tension she feels. She's still working for the company because they're not dating anymore, but my son is very angry with his dad because he feels that he used his power to break them up. Well, he did. His father really did abuse his power just to break his son and this woman up. It's not like this policy of not dating within the office had already existed. He imposed it just so that this would happen. Essentially, your husband has told his son, I don't love you. I don't care about your happiness, and if you don't do what I want, then I'll control you. Oh, and by the way, you're too stupid to make any important decisions in your life. I'll have to make them for you. That's a pretty terrible message to hear as a kid. You continue that your son told me that he was so hurt and that he begged his dad to please not make this decision, but he wouldn't listen. And now my son says he'll never forgive his father. Unresolved anger and pain. This is what happens with conditional love. Kids will put up with it to a certain point, but at some point, all of the lack of real love in their lives is going to kill them in some way. They'll become angry and aggressive. They'll completely withdraw. They'll treat their pain with alcohol and drugs, something. And if this cycle isn't broken, it's possible it could destroy your son. You continue. I've said all of this to set up a question. It was just a preamble. My son is using marijuana. I've known this for a while, and even though it was occasional, I never liked it. He'd tell me that he's only doing it now and then. Oh, that's like in all the years I worked in emergency rooms and sewed up hundreds of drunks. Every time I said to him, so, how much have you had to drink tonight? I didn't ask them if they had anything to drink. How much? It depended on their language, but 2 beers, dos cervezas. It was always 2. It just cracked me up. I can just picture everybody out there drinking 2, stopping, but some people get really drunk on 2. So he was saying that he only does it now and again, but I think he's doing it more often now. Yeah. Marijuana is used to treat physical and emotional pain, which is what he's doing, so of course he's using it. In fact, his father just as well have mainlined this stuff into his son's veins. It's the pain your son is feeling as a result of not feeling loved that has led to the use of drugs. You continue, my husband does not know because I've kept it from him. Oh, this is just all part of the same package. Here your son is afraid of his father and controlled by him, and so are you. My goodness, what do you think you're teaching your son if you're keeping secrets from your husband to protect your son? This secret thing is just symptomatic of what's happening all throughout your family. Between you and your husband, you and your son, your husband, your son, it's just a mess. You continue, my son and I have discussed this at great length, and I've always paid attention to what he does every day, or who he's with, or called him when he's out to make sure he's okay. We're so sure as parents we're doing the right thing, but look what you're doing here. His dad controls him with anger, and you watch over him like a mother hen / policeman / nursery leader. So this kid is getting all these messages that says that he's not loved and he's incompetent from both of you. Now, different style of delivery, but it's the same dang message, honey. And you don't mean to do it either, but it's happening and it's killing him. There are no violent issues at home. He's loving toward me and his sisters, but I know that he's engaged in some physical fights outside the home. Happy people don't engage in some physical fights outside the home. He's never gone to jail, but he was once charged with possession and was cleared of the charges. I think I give him real love, but I can't stop the feeling that I should do more. You're loving him as well as you can. There's really no criticism of that. But you give 20 different evidences here that what you're giving him is the care that you would give a small child. It's not the unconditional love you'd give to a 20-year-old. You're caretaking him. You're treating him like a victim. You continue, I think if I tell his dad it will make matters worse, but I'm scared that this is the wrong decision. I feel like I need to do something. What should I do? So start with the truth. Read a little bit more about real love. You don't need to read a whole lot, but at least to get kind of a glimmer of what it's all about. I would suggest you start reading Real Love and Parenting for sure. Then sit down with your husband and describe what unconditional love is. And prove to your husband, you can do it right out of the books, that what the two of you have been giving your son is not unconditional love. There's no disappointment or irritation or caretaking or protecting or lying in real love. And between the two of you, you're just covering all the bases that are confusing this kid. And then you tell the dad that as you're explaining this to him, just to listen, because you've got something important to tell him, or otherwise he'll interrupt you. Well, he'd probably interrupt you anyway and tell you that he's right, because he obviously has a strong need to be right, or he wouldn't have controlled his son. And then tell him that it's time to start doing something differently with this boy, or he's going to end up seriously damaged. You're going to have to tell your husband at some point, I would suggest soon, right when you're having this conversation, and say, this kid is so miserable that he's gone to using drugs just to deal with his pain. And now we don't need to do some knee-jerk crazy thing like call the cops, but we're hurting this boy, and we've got to stop it. You and I, this is you talking to your husband, you and I have to change and be different, or we're going to continue to keep hurting our son. He's proving by his use of drugs that he's in pain, and it can't be the mailman's fault. It's got to be us. So we're the ones that have got something to learn here. Now, about the marijuana. Now you can move on to consequences about his choice. It's just so risky to have somebody smoking marijuana in your home. You know, I mean, what if he's caught doing a deal from your home? Or the police track him to your house and they find marijuana, you know, in an abundant supply in his bedroom, and then, you know, using whatever the latest anti-drug act is, they seize your home and you forfeit the home. So, you know, I would tell my son, if it was me, I would tell him, look, kid, we've really screwed you up. This is really all our fault. We haven't loved you the way that you needed. We really botched this job. We're sorry for that. We're going to work at changing it. We're going to work all together. We're going to get a coach who's going to teach us about real love as a family. We're going to do whatever it takes to make you happy, but in the short term, you can't be smoking. And so, I would tell him he's got 30 days to get his urine clean. And then at the end of 30 days, you're going to start urine testing him, periodically. Unless, of course, he wants to live somewhere else. And he can certainly do that. But it's just too risky. So there's a lot of changes that have to happen here. That's an awful lot of information I gave you. But I would suggest that you start implementing it for the sake of your son. It's never too late, but, well, yeah, actually it is. Because I've seen kids like this who then go out and their parents didn't help them, and then they're using marijuana or they're using drugs, they wrap their car around a tree, and then they're dead. And then everybody goes, oh, how could this have happened? What could we have done? Well, there's a lot you can do, and it's better to do it now than make the decision to do it after the kid's dead. Here's a viewer who says, what can I do to solve a conflict with a partner who decides to ignore me? The reason that partners do the ignoring thing is to hurt you. It's sulking. It's almost always. And so what you do is you don't play the sulking game, which is, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I've done something to offend you, because that's why they sulk. And as soon as we do that I'm so sorry thing, well, then we've just trained them to sulk some more. So I would suggest that you say to this partner who's ignoring you, there's something that I'd like to say to you. Do you have a time in the next hour or so that we could talk? You set a time for talking. I assume anytime I call somebody, and you'd have to give me more details if I'm not getting the right picture of this when you say ignore me, because that's not a whole lot of information. But on the whole, I assume that when I call somebody, I'm interrupting them. And so I ask people almost immediately, is this a good time for you to talk? If it's not, then we set up a time to talk. So I would do that with him. I would just assume that, when he's sulking is obviously a bad time. He's asking you to play a victim-y little childish baby game with him, which isn't going to work. So you just say to him, is there a time that we could set within sometime in the next hour that we can talk? And if he still ignores you and does the pouty, sulky thing, then, you wait for 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it is until he's obviously not sulking anymore. Even if it's the next day, and say, I have something I want to talk to you about. When's it going to be? If your response to each of these suggestions is, well, but then he'd still be ignoring me, well, then why are you married? If he's ignoring you constantly, what are you doing together? So wait till a time that somebody's listening. Don't address people while they're insane. While they're angry, they're insane. While they're acting hurt, while they're withdrawing, while they're lying. Any of the getting and protecting behaviors are forms of insanity. Wait until somebody's relatively sane, and then set up a time to talk, and then bring it up then. So, let's see, I have a real problem being responsible. This is another viewer. And I can't really figure out why. I notice that sometimes I just keep doing other things instead of focusing on the things that I'm supposed to do. It's like I keep busy so that I feel less guilty of myself. Can I get some input on this? Lacking responsibility is such a multi-level thing. One of the reasons that we're not responsible is that the things that would count as responsibility are almost invariably things we don't like to do. We'd rather play. And so, we're just lazy. In which case I would suggest that you talk to some wise men and women who care about you, and you say, I want to give you a list of, I want to email you a list, because nobody wants to listen to this over the phone. I'm going to email you a list of 12 things I'm going to get done in the next 2 days. And then 2 days from now, I'll report to you on how I did with each of them and why I didn't accomplish them if I didn't. we tend to do better when we're held accountable for our behavior, but that's usually true in a lasting way only if we're held accountable by people who will love us no matter what we do. So I would suggest you practice being accountable, which is part of being responsible. Another reason that, a common reason that I've seen for people not doing the responsible thing, like their paperwork or their taxes or whatever, is that they've kind of learned over a lifetime that no matter how much imitation love they get, it doesn't make them happy. And so after a while, they just kind of give up. They go, why do the next responsible thing? The 3,000 responsible things that I've done prior to this didn't yield me anything, so why do it now? Hence the need for, in the meantime, our getting all the real love that we can so that we work from a baseline of being at least, moderately happy. And then we can accomplish the things that just have to be done. Some of those things won't produce happiness, but not doing them produces unhappiness. So again, I would suggest you working with a wise person to be held accountable, which will help you with both of those aspects of irresponsibility. So thank you all for your questions. They've been delightful. We look forward to meeting with you again a week from tonight on a Tuesday. And in the meantime, send me your questions. They've been, wonderful. I've been getting them all week. At greg@reallove.com, and we'll go over as many as we can a week from tonight. Between now and then, remember that it's always about real love. See you then.